matters that I peel and grind the carrots. So the carrots have been peeled. I've got them in my food processor, and we'll pulse them a few times and give them a quick grind. That looks about right. Now I'm going to eventually be putting all this soup in the pressure cooker to cook off, but I believe that cooking the carrots and the onions and the meat slowly in a little bit of oil first actually sweetens the soup. The caramelization of the carrots and the onions and the browning of the meat adds a lot of flavor to the soup. So I'm going to start it. Okay, I've chopped a whole bunch of celery. That is one bunch of celery. And I'm giving it a quick wash in the colander. And then we'll put that in the food processor and give that a grind as well. I've also included the leaves. And that will be added to the pot, slowly cooked down to add flavor to the stock. I'm peeling and quartering onions to also add to the food process. Adding the onions to the pot. Alright, here's the onions, carrots, and celery chopped and slowly cooking in a pot. Pardon my French, but the hoity-toity name for this mixture would be mirepoix. I've heated the pan and I've added a tablespoon or two of peanut oil. Use any kind of oil you want to the pan. And to save a few calories, instead of using ground beef, I'm adding 2 pounds of ground turkey to this pot. And I'm going to brown it up so it gets some flavor released before I combine it into the soup. Alright, I've actually added a 1/3 pound, pound of ground turkey to this pot because I want to have enough to can. And I know my husband's going to want to eat some tonight, and my daughters might be coming over, so yeah, I'm going to extend it a little with that. And I was out in my garden. Now it's December, and I found a very nice jalapeno pepper out there. So I figured I might as well cut it up and put it in the mirepoix, in the celery, carrots, and onion to add a little kick, just because, well, because it couldn't hurt. Alright, there's half the jalapeno pepper that I've chopped up, and I'm putting that in the pot. I'm about to add my veg into my pot of meat and stir that up to combine it. Plus I'm going to add some frozen corn and frozen peas to round it out a little. I've diced up 5 or 6 potatoes, and I'm not going to add those to the pot because during the canning process I don't want them to turn to mush. So I'm just going to put them in as is when I start to can and let the canning process cook those within the soup. And I will be adding some crushed tomatoes and probably a little water to finish out the soup, and of course the herbs. I've added one 16-ounce package of frozen corn and half of another 16-ounce package of frozen peas, so 8 ounces of peas. I threw in 2 bay leaves, and I'm now going to cover it with water. I also put in about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. I'm going to save the salt till I put it in the jar. Just covering it with water, and I'm also going to add 2 28-ounce cans of crushed tomatoes. The soup has been in the crock pot for a couple of hours, so it's heated through. And I have washed my jars in hot soapy water and rinsed them well. I've done the same with my lids and rings and bands, and they are now sitting in a pot of hot water. I've put 3 quarts of water into my canner, which is the recommended amount by this canner manufacturer, and I've turned it on and it's heating up. So now I'm going to start filling my jars to pressure can the soup. I've divided up the potatoes, and I've got about 3/4 to 1 cup of potatoes in each jar, and I've put a half a teaspoon of salt into each jar. And the salt I use is this pickling and canning salt, because that will help keep the broth clearer. Regular salt with iodine and other additives, declumping additives, that's not the best thing to use for canning. So now we fill the jars. Now I don't want my soup too thick, because we want it to be thin enough that when it processes, the heat gets through all the jars, all the contents of the jar, and there's no thick spots in the middle that don't get the same amount of heat to them. Density is not a good thing, so I'm watching to be sure that this is not too dense. And I'm removing the bay leaves so one doesn't get stuck in a jar. When jars are processed, and especially in storage, the flavorings can really strengthen. So you don't want to season too much when you're canning, because when you open the jar that's been stored for a while, you might not like what you get if you put too much spice in there, because it will intensify. Now we're filling these to within 1 inch of the top, which is the bottom rung. So I fill the jars to 1 inch from the top. You want to leave that headroom of 1 inch. And then you need to burp your jars or debubble your jars. You just put a non-metal implement inside, a clean non-metal implement, and you push it around a little to make sure all the air bubbles are out. Then I take a little vinegar on a clean cloth and make sure the edge is nice and clean so it won't interfere with the seal. And I'm using the Tatler lids, which are a throwback to the old-fashioned kind. This is a hard plastic lid with a rim inside, and it comes with a separate sealing ring. And you can fit it on there, put it on your jar, make sure there's good contact. Screw on your band, snug it up finger tight, but for the Tatlers you take it off just a little bit to allow it for the air. It's got to be able to breathe while it's in the canner. When they come out of the canner, you're going to snug them down tight. So I'm going to fill the rest of the jars like this, 6-quart jars and 1.5 pint jar in the canner. I've inspected the lid. I've blown out the petcock and looked through to make sure it was clear. The little safety valve thingy is loose. So now I'm going to put the lid on. Let's see, I have to line up, there it is, the arrows. Put the lid on and close it. I don't know if I can do it one-handed. Alright, close it up. And now I'm going to let that petcock steam, and when there's a steady stream of steam coming out of there for 10 minutes, then we can put the pressure regulator on. The safety valve has popped up. There's a steady stream of steam coming out of the petcock. So I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. Let that vent for 10 minutes, and when it's done I can put the pressure regulator on. Alright, it's been venting for 10 minutes. So I can now put on the pressure regulator. And now I'll wait for that dial to go up to 10 before I start timing. Okay, the gauge got above 10, so I turned my heat down to level it off a little at 10, and I'm gonna set my timer for an hour and a half or 90 minutes. Okay, so just got to make sure that gauge doesn't go below 10 and stays between 10, 11, around there for 90 minutes for processing. Okay, the 90 minutes is up. Just turned off the heat, and I will move the canner over very carefully. Now I'm going to wait till the gauge falls. It went almost up to 12 at the very end. So I'm going to let it fall down to 0 and wait for this to drop. And also wait for this little rubber seal here to drop right down flat. And then I can take the pressure regulator. The safety valve has dropped. The needle is on 0. So that means I can now take off the pressure regulator. And I will set the timer for 10 minutes. And at the end of 10 minutes, I can open the canner. Okay, 10 minutes is up. Now I can remove the lid. Of course, open it, letting the steam go away from you, not up in your face. And we can remove the jars. That jar broke, so I lost that quart. Oh, that's too bad. Well, my battery ran out as I was taking them out of the canner, but now I've got fresh batteries in, and there are my 6 jars that came out intact. 1 jar broke, so that's sad. The bottom broke out of that one. I don't know if it had a hairline crack I missed or what, but these are out. They're bum lead. I already tightened the lids down good because these are the Tatler lids and you need to do that. So here I have 5 full quarts of turkey burger soup and 1.5 pint jar of turkey burger soup, a family favorite of ours. And these will be going into my pantry.